We're doing a mimer on Purim, but we are taking a slight detour, not really a detour, to talk about Yom Kippur. Why? Because as we see up here, the Yom HaKippurim, here, let me bring this a little bit closer so everyone can see. The Yom, in the Torah, Yom HaKippurim, which is Yom Kippur, right? That's what it's called in the Torah, is Ke Purim. It's like Purim. Do we see that? And this is from the Tikkunei Zohar that makes this comparison between Yom Kippur and Purim. I always say that, you know, the vast Jewish public, they're going to shul on the wrong day. They're going on the Yom HaKippurim, but they should be going on Purim. You go on Yom Kippur, and this is your experience of Judaism, once a year, that's plenty, right? But if you go to shul on Purim, say, wow, this is amazing. Maybe I'll show up twice a year or a few times a year, right? So, but anyway, that's not what the mimer says. So the mimer goes and makes the association between Purim. The name Purim itself means what? It means lots. They threw lots to choose the day, to choose the right day that Haman was looking for, the perfect day to get rid of the Jewish people. And so he did the lots, but there's also lots associated with Yom Kippur, interestingly enough, even though that's certainly not what the name Kippurim, what that means. But in fact, we have lots. We have the two goats that were chosen, that were identical in price and appearance, and they were put before the Kohen Gadol, and he'd pick out from a lottery, basically. He'd choose one that would go La Hashem, and one for pushing off the cliff. And it was a lottery that would decide which one went which way. So the Alter Rebbe then goes on to say, so what is the internal quality of, what is Yom Kippur really all about? And this is an unusual, kind of a less usual idea of what Yom Kippur is about. It's basically the day. Yom Kippur is about the completion of the giving of the Torah. The Torah was given at Mount Sinai. Of course, we have the festival of Shavuot that was on the sixth day of Sivan, but then we needed to get the tablets to complete that, and there we had a real detour with the golden calf, a whole story. I'm sure you've heard about it. Ultimately, Hashem gave it back to the Jewish people. On what day? On Yom Kippur. That's why it's the Day of Atonement, because that, of course, was the day that Hashem forgave us from everything, from our horrific national iniquity of the golden calf. But it becomes a day of atonement for all. But it's also the day of the idea of the giving of the Torah. Now, in terms of the giving of the Torah, the Alter Rebbe says what was unique about the giving of the Torah was not so much the information that was conveyed, but it was the relationship that was procured through the giving of the Torah. And I think Teddy Roosevelt said it best. You've heard of Teddy Roosevelt? He was, I think he also served 2 non-consecutive terms as president, right? Oh, and it wasn't him, it was Taft? Who was it? Anyway, it's not important. But in any case, Teddy Roosevelt, he had a lot of good lines. One of his lines was...
Sorry, I believe it was McKinley.
McKinley? Really? Okay. Zol sein azoi. So that's fine. So what did Teddy Roosevelt say that's connected to this mimer? He said, nobody cares what you know unless they know that you care. So there's a very interesting relationship between information and a caring. That is such a remarkable idea, right? You could hear you could have somebody who's very intelligent, and certainly, well, listen, we like to listen to very intelligent people and hear what they have to say, but if you go to listen to a lecture and a speaker, and the person seems to be very much into themselves, right? And their own, look at what I know kind of thing. It's hard to hear their message. It's hard to listen to them, even though they might be sharing brilliant ideas and everything, but it's hard to take it. But Judaism, Kabbalah in particular, sees the conveying of information about a deep inner bond between two people, a deep caring. And this is why by the giving of the Torah, it says, Panim el panim diber Hashem imachem, that God spoke to you face to face. Now, Hashem has no face. So what does that mean? Panim is the Hebrew word for panimiut, the innermost. How you feel on the inside shows on your face, right? Isn't that, sometimes it doesn't work in our favor. Somebody goes and brings you a gift, it's your birthday, and said, oh, I worked really hard on getting this gift for you, and I worked so hard here, and you open it up, and it's really like something you really don't want, right? So if you're a very good actor, or you think about the truth of the matter and not about the physical, then you can put on a good face. But sometimes it's very hard to put on a good face, right? What you're feeling on the inside shows in your face. That's your panimiut. Your panim, your face, is your innermost, which is interesting because in the English language, face is used for just to have just the opposite meaning, right? Like prima facie, and our attorney here could tell us. I think is that an attorney term, prima facie? It's a logic term. Or a facade, right? What's a facade? A facade is something just a cover, right? Exactly not what's going on in the inside. And facade is from the word face, right? It's basically, it's from the word, it's the same word, it's from face. So in the English language, the connotation of facial or face is going to be surface, right? Surface. I don't know if that could also be just on the surface. But Jewish-wise, panim, your panim, right? The panim is anything but superficial. The back is superficial because the back, it always looks the same no matter what. If you're having a good day or a bad day, a wonderful day.
Well, the pay itself.
What?
The pay itself turns and circles on itself.
It goes into the panim. It goes into the inside. Very interesting. It's one of the.
And I was wrong before. Grover Cleveland. I just checked.
Okay, Grover Cleveland. I can go to sleep tonight.
I can. That was my day.
Okay. So very interesting. So Isaac is sharing with us an interesting phenomena about the pay. That a pay is one of the few Hebrew letters that comes and something's operating on the inside. Right? Can we see that? Not sure what you can see here. There we go. Yes, you can see it. So there's the pay. The first letter of face is a pay and you have that little piece on the inside. And that's a panim. So panim el panim, God spoke to us face to face. Then we had the remarkable teaching last week. It was so remarkable that it could be that nobody remembers it because sometimes it's just so overwhelming. And it talks about the image of a person. Be'al demus hakise demus kamare adam, and on the image of the throne Ezekiel saw like the image of a person. Oh, that's very problematic. If you're a believing Jew, ein lo guf, he has no body, and no velo demusa guf, he doesn't even have the image of a body. There's no body. But yeah, Kabbalistically, we speak about different parts, and in the Torah it speaks about the arm of Hashem and different things, right? So we have to understand how to take all of this. But the Alter Rebbe gave us a remarkable insight into what the prophet Ezekiel saw. Does somebody remember from last week? What did the prophet Ezekiel see? So here's the thing. When you love another, you think about them and you have an image of them in your mind. So what was, so to speak, in Hashem's mind? Or not even so to speak, what was actually in Hashem's mind, intimately in his mind, was the Jewish people. And so Ezekiel saw the image of, it was the Mus Kamara Adam. Who was the Adam? Who was the Adam? Who was the person that he saw? It was the person of the Jewish people. It was as the Jewish people combined and unite to create one human being. That was what was on God's mind, in God's mind, intimately in the mind of Hashem, was engraved the Jewish people. And that's what Ezekiel saw. Now, this is going to connect a little bit to where we take this today, although the Alter Rebbe doesn't make this connection. But I mentioned to you last week, when Ezekiel had this vision of the greatness of Hashem, it was the chariot, and the chariot was going somewhere. Does anybody know? Does anybody remember where the chariot was going? The presence of God was on the move. It was exiting stage left. So the image of, so the whole Merkava and the whole vision that Ezekiel saw was God leaving the holy temple. Ezekiel, the whole prophecy of Ezekiel is a prophecy talking about the destruction of the Jewish people and then the eventual rebirth of the Jewish people. But he was living at the time, during the time of the destruction, right? And then he himself had this vision al Nahar Kavar. He was in Babylon at the river Kavar. And eventually he has it at the end of Ezekiel, he has the vision of the temple. He's actually brought by some angelic being to Yerushalayim, and he sees the rebuilding of the ultimate Beis Hamikdash. And that's recorded at great length in the book of Yechezkel. But at this point, at the beginning of Yechezkel, this is the first chapter, it's the destruction of the temple. Hashem, he sees this, but it's actually on its way out. Hashem is on his way out. So if Hashem is on his way out, why was the Jewish people, why did Hashem have this great love for the Jewish people? They had sinned to such a degree that Hashem destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. But yet, at that point, and specifically at that point, and we're going to see in this mimer a little bit later, it's specifically during the time of exile that we have the most profound love of God is revealed. And so the situation of the Jewish people in exile is actually not the lack of the love of Hashem, but an extra measure of the love of Hashem during the time of exile. We're going to see that soon. Okay, so let's jump back into the mimer here. This is all just a reminder of what we have been learning. So there we go. So we have the idea of Hashem being engraved. And so the Alter Rebbe now goes on to a theme and explains that when you have this panim with Hashem, when Hashem is going to be your utmost of utmost importance, that means that everything physical now becomes secondary. Everything in the physical realm has to become, not that we don't do it, we take care of our health, we brush our teeth, we exercise, we eat, etc., but everything in the physical world no longer is that the most important thing. Like, imagine there was hopefully in everybody's life a time when they were in love. And I mean, you're still in love, or but there was a time when that in love totally encompassed you. Right, then you got married. But there was a time when you were totally preoccupied with that love. So hopefully we know what that feeling is like, where yes, you do everything else, you do all of the other things, but everything else is just a means to an end, and everything else is insignificant, the second, third, or fourth rung compared to the first rung, and that is being with the one that you love. That is the most important thing. And so that is how we need to be, the Alter Rebbe says, with our relationship to Hashem. And that's how the Alter Rebbe explains that it says that every time God spoke, their neshama flew away. Now he explains that the flying away of the neshama from the body means that their whole important thing was the neshama, and the body was left in the dust, meaning the body, the bodily and physical, was totally insignificant because of the panim bipanim experience, because of our most intimate, utmost personal and meaningful direct relationship with Hashem himself. Everything else became insignificant. And so too now we need to feel disinterested in our physical matters. Like our sages said, that even regarding marital relations, a person should feel that he is forced to do it as an obligation. Since marital relations is a mitzvah that he is required to perform, but not for physical enjoyment. All right, so this is what it's brought in the Gemara, that a person, even a relation, which is a very intimate connection, but you're not doing it for the physical enjoyment. Now, I would assume you have to have some level of physical enjoyment, certainly on the male part of it, for it to work, but that's not what it's about, right? You're doing it because this is a mitzvah. And how much more so regarding other physical matters that are not a mitzvah, that he should feel forced into them for survival, but not feel interested in them for the sake of the enjoyment. So this is very much not a popular notion. Today, even less popular, right? That we are meant to consume our food. Our food is not meant to consume us. Today, people get very consumed. You have a terminology, foodies. A foodie, right? Their whole preoccupation, right, is in the food and into the preparation of the food and how it's plated, and it's a ganze meise, and this becomes a whole entire preoccupation. The Alter Rebbe says, no, boys and girls, this is not the correct way. The Alter Rebbe mentions as a side note that the reason for feeling, and now he says a very interesting idea to make a very stark demarcation between the Jewish approach and, say, other religious approaches, that the reason why during marital relations that we feel forced is not because marital relations is something lowly. And the Alter Rebbe qualifies that here. So Alter Rebbe mentions in a side note that the reason for feeling forced into having marital relations is not because it is essentially something repulsive, like some people may think, based on the fact that it makes someone ritually impure, they have to immerse in a mikveh afterwards. That's not why we feel, okay, we have to force ourselves into it. It's not because it's something repulsive, God forbid. On the contrary, it's a lofty mitzvah. But the point is that it does involve a very profound human pleasure, and we shouldn't be doing it for the profound human pleasure that's involved. So the Alter Rebbe says clearly, not like people think that marital relations are something repulsive, since afterwards you have to go to mikveh, and so this is something lowly or impure. This is not true, since essentially this is a great spiritual act. And even above in the spiritual worlds, they recognize how lofty this mitzvah is. So marital relations is a very high thing. And on the spiritual worlds also, it's a very high spiritual thing. Still, we should feel forced into performing the mitzvah rather than fulfilling it out of personal desire. Right? So so that we can connect with the true spirituality of what this is about, and not with the carnal element of that is normally what it's about. We have to raise ourselves higher than that carnal desire and be connected to the spiritual desire and the fact that this is a mitzvah. And so too regarding eating and other physical matters, that a person should feel forced into them. What is the Alter Rebbe talking about here? Well, this is all about when you have the panim b'panim, when you have the face-to-face relationship with God, which means the intimate, innermost connection with Hashem, everything else, the significance of everything else, and all of these other spiritual drives, not spiritual, all of these other physical drives and drives for enjoyment and pleasure fall to the side. So how much more so regarding eating and other physical matters, that a person should feel forced into them for survival and not for pleasure. And he should not say that he only wants to eat certain kinds of food that he enjoys, or similar notion, right, I'm not in the mood for this, I'm not in the mood for that. You're eating the food for fuel so you can be alive, so you can serve Hashem, period. Eat your pasta. Try telling that to the kids, right? Try to tell your children, eat what's in front of you, right? Because you're eating for survival. That is connected to pasta. To pasta maruba, lo to pasta. But anyway.
Rabbi?
Yes, please, Moshe.
Okay. I just want to ask you something about what you just said. If food had no taste to it, absolutely no taste or flavor to it, I don't think that, and we were just using it for fuel, I don't think that would be, it wouldn't be much good for us, because you want to be able to I think the flavor of the food and our taste buds, are really supposed to interact, which does cause pleasure from the point of view of elevating ourselves to a certain point from the effects of the flavor of the food, which can elevate us also, you know what I'm saying? But just to eat food for fuel and it doesn't have any taste to it, I don't think that would be very productive. Wouldn't be beneficial. It seems like I couldn't imagine just eating everything that we ate had no flavor to it, and because the flavor interacts with the enjoyment of eating, which does elevate our it has an effect on our neshama. So
you're saying that when you eat food and you enjoy it, that is adding not just to your physical pleasure, but that's also has a spiritual benefit.
Let me tell you what somebody told me one time, because they said, well, I'm eating something. They're eating something like a dill or something, and something that has an effect, and they put themselves. It reminds them of a certain point in time of their life. They when they experience a certain effect. I'm trying to remember how he put this, but he says, when I eat, he says, I eat for the taste, and he says that the food that you eat can also bring you to a point in time which is peaceful and it can be very elevating, But if that food did not have that flavor or taste to it, it could be very dull, I mean, let me give you another example. Our smell also, You know, down here in Florida, there's not many flowers. You know, I mean, there are, but a lot of them don't have a smell to it. You know what I'm saying? If you go to the Midwest during the spring, you know, you have lilacs, you have different kinds of flowers that have a smell to
Oh
it.
my goodness.
You
Don't
know,
remind me. That
or even a
smell in April, May. Unbelievable. Anyway, oh,
right
go ahead.
now, even a citron, for example, you know, an etrog, you know, has a smell to it.
Well, the fruit of the orange blossom is also intoxicating, but it doesn't fill the air like the lilac does.
Yeah, but I think Hashem intended us to be able to appreciate these scents and these tastes, you know, that for a purpose to elevate us. And, you know, and I don't feel that, you know, if we just use food for fuel, you know, we just say it's for fuel and we're not taking into account the, uh, you know, the flavor of the food, which can affect our neshama. I don't think that that would be much, it wouldn't be very beneficial.
All right. So you disagree with Alter Rebbe.
I'm not saying I disagree, but I mean,
It's
of course,
okay. You're in safe company. It's okay. I will tell you, Moshe, listen, number one, I'm with you. And not, but I'm with you not even on the spiritual level. I enjoy eating food, and I'm not going to do what the Alter Rebbe says here. I can assure you. Okay?
right, right.
This is a certain level of ideal, and one thing I know that the Alter Rebbe is right, okay? The Alter Rebbe himself, I mean, this is a story that's told by the Rebbes that in the Alter Rebbe's household, so already at a certain point, the daughters took on the duties in the kitchen, okay? All of the cooking and preparation and all of that. They took on all of that. Now, there was an important guest that was coming to visit the Alter Rebbe. I don't recall who it was. And the mother, the Rebbetzin, wanted to also participate in the kitchen because, you know, important guests. But the daughter said, but we're not going to be, you know, it's our job. We want to do it too. And they came to a compromise that the Rebbetzin would add the salt because the salt is what tastes the food, adds the taste and everything. And so that would be considered a significant part of the meal. She'd be involved in the preparation, agreed upon. So the Rebbetzin salted the food, and the girls were going and cooking the food. And as they were cooking the food, they also added salt. They had forgotten not to add the salt. So now you had twice salted soup that was being prepared. And it was brought to the table. The Alter Rebbe was eating the soup, eating. And he looked at the guest and he said, why are you not eating? He said, I'm sorry. I mean, no, I don't think anybody else was eating either. He said, with all due respect, how can you eat it? It's, you know, it's oversalted. He said, really? Ever since he was in the yeshiva of the Maggid, when he studied under the Maggid, he lost his sense of taste. He no longer tastes food. Mm-hmm. They learned that the taste of food and eating food for enjoyment is a negative thing, and they did without it. They just ate food as a fuel, and they didn't even. They had learned to such a degree that they stopped tasting. They stopped tasting food. All right. Beyond our pay grade, right? And you're saying more. Why would you want to live like that, right? Okay, I get it. I understand. So let's, if we can, let's at least try to take a lesson from the Alter Rebbe, okay? If we can't buy the whole thing and we can't incorporate the whole thing, right?
You're welcome.
What? Let's take a lesson in our life. And the lesson in our life could be that we shouldn't be preoccupied with the food. We shouldn't be overly preoccupied. There should be pleasure in the food that we should always try to make sure other people have, that our guests have. We make sure that the poor people have. And even when we eat, here's something that I'll share with you. Oh, my wife is not on the call, so I can share this. Sometimes I'm eating the food, and sometimes I don't particularly like it. But you know what I love? I love my wife. I love marriage. Have you ever been at a point in your life where your lack of love for the food came into conflict with the love of your life, your spouse? That happens, right? When you really don't love the food, but you love your spouse. So how do you deal with that? Well, if you are totally committed to your taste experience and your pleasure experience in the food, well, then it's simple. You know, you need to tell your wife so she doesn't make this dish again. What if you hurt her feelings? Well, you know, she'll have to deal with it. We all hurt each other's feelings sometimes, right? If you take the Alter Rebbe approach, then you realize that there's something much more important than the taste of the food, and that is the feelings of my wife. My wife worked to prepare this food, and I'm going to eat it, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to tell her that I enjoyed it. Instead of being so self-centered to every sensual pleasure that we can possibly get. This is not the purpose of our existence. So if we can't apply it all, you know, and in today's day and age, and even amongst Chassidim, this is not applied in an absolute sense, I would say, by it's applied by very few. And I don't think every person should be applying this the way the Alter Rebbe says. But like I say, we can take lessons from it, right? We can take something from it. Yes, Moshe, do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
That's maybe the point here. So to take this whole hog, to use a very bad terminology, we can't do. But we can at least become a little less into the pleasures that we're getting in life and more into the higher purpose of what it is that we're doing. All right, so thank you for bringing that up, because that is an important thing. Now, this whole idea of enjoying food and getting a spiritual benefit from enjoying food, the Alter Rebbe doesn't really take that approach so much. Although it's brought, Rabbi Eliezer in the Gemara, it says that he would always make sure to have a taste of any fruit. There was a fruit he didn't taste, he would always make sure to go and taste it, make a shachianu on it, and he was going to be taken to task in heaven for not trying this food that God put on earth, right? God put this pleasure on earth for us and for us to benefit from it. So this is in support of what you're saying, right? And we also have furthermore by the Nazir. So the Nazir was a man or a woman who took a 30-day oath to abstain from wine. And afterwards, he had to bring a sin offering. He or she had to bring a sin offering. So the question is, why a sin offering? What sin did they do? On the contrary, he took on this greater level of worshiping, of serving Hashem, of being a Nazir. So the rabbis teach because he took on himself to abstain from wine for 30 days. And this is a pleasure that Hashem put into the world for us. Not for us to abstain from, but to what do they say? Enjoy in moderation. So there are arguments to be made, Moshe, for your point, right? The Alter Rebbe seems to take the approach that the idea of enjoying food we're going to do on our own, no matter what he says. So he's going to take the approach of not living for pleasure. If we would graph our day of how much time we spend to make sure that we have our food just so we have our chair just so we have everything just so, we become pleasure seekers. And today it's very easy because the food is abundant and very good food is very easy to find and come by, right? And we're going to do it. But we should learn to live for Hashem. Now, should we be eating the food and saying, I'm enjoying this and thank you, Hashem, for this? That's a beautiful thing. Not the point the Alter Rebbe is making. Yes, Reb David.
Sometimes I point out to my wife, very innocently, a suggestion in the food, like to do this instead of that. And she takes it like a personal insult.
Yours too, eh? Right? So we should stop doing that. My wife made a meal the other day, and she said, "How did you like it?" I said, "I loved it. It was delicious." So she said, "Should I make it again?" I said, "No, it was so delicious. We should really have it very infrequently." I made that up, but anyway, but you're right. I do. I'll say sometimes, maybe you should add this, maybe you should add that. Maybe I should keep my mouth shut. That's what we can learn.
I've learned to always ask first. Say something that gets a sense of how important they think it is.
Right,
And
right.
then you're usually safe. And you can do it with a word or so, or getting up, or turning.
Sure.
Turn it back to themselves, and they're usually bursting. Oh, I know I put in a little too much salt.
Right,
Right.
right. There you go. Okay, back to the mimer. So the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about this a little bit more. So how much more so regarding eating and other physical matters that a person should feel forced into them for survival and not for pleasure. And he should not say that he only wants to eat certain foods and not others, right? You eat what you eat for nourishment. Then he will turn his back on his physical desires. Then automatically he will be able to be totally interested in and focused on Hashem, like two people who are talking face to face with a real connection. So the Alter Rebbe has this idea, and we are going to have to apply it with an eyedropper. Maybe we can't take the whole thing, but we can apply it with an eyedropper and take an element of it. But the Alter Rebbe says that when we are preoccupied with food and other pleasures of life, you're not going to be able to be preoccupied with the love of Hashem. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So we see that on Yom Kippur, we have the power from the Torah to overcome our physical desires and fully connect to Hashem, to the point of connecting to Him beyond prior sins and logic. Similarly on Purim, which is connected to Yom Kippur, through the fact that the king Achashverosh ordered that Haman and his sons should be hung on the gallows, which were higher than 50 amos, as is known. So Haman they hanged him on the gallows. How high were the gallows? 50 cubits. And the Alter Rebbe is going to use this idea of the 50 as a metaphor for nature. And that this brought out how from beyond the limitations of nature, 50 amos, we can see how Haman was really part of something good. He brought the Jewish people to return to Hashem through Teshuvah. So the Alter Rebbe explains, or Rabbi Katz explained, this is similar to the Teshuvah of Yom Kippur when we reveal how Hashem allowed the sin itself to happen for a good purpose. We said this above. La Hashem chatas, the piece of wood that would be put on the goat that would be offered to Hashem. It said La Hashem chatas, meaning the sin offering for God, offered on the Mizbeach. But the Alter Rebbe interpreted La Hashem chatas, that the sin itself, the chatas itself, the sin itself is La Hashem. It has a divine purpose to bring us closer to God. Through the sin, we feel the distance, and we feel the need to do teshuvah. So the sin itself brings us to Hashem. So this is similar to the teshuvah of Yom Kippur when we reveal how Hashem allowed the sin itself to happen for a good purpose, namely, to bring us closer to Him by overcoming the sin. So too, through our teshuvah and overcoming Haman, we became closer to Hashem. So just like the sins become elevated to a higher level on Yom Kippur, so too on Purim, the concealment of Hashem caused by Haman and his sons became elevated to a higher level where we see the good purpose behind it, This is hinted to in the fact that Haman and his sons were hung above 50 amos, representing a level above our worldly perspective. So 50 years, for instance, you have 50 years of a Yovel, called a world of time. So Yovel is called Olam in the Torah. It's referred to as Olam. You know, in English, we'd say forever, right? How do we use the word forever in English? To mean a long time, right? I haven't seen you like in forever. When I see somebody I've never met before, I say that to them. They look at me. They said, yeah, it's been literally forever. Anyway, but forever, we use the word forever to mean a long time. So in the Torah too, Olam means a long time, and that is specifically the time of a Yovel. And that is connected to Olam, meaning world, worldly involvement, physical involvement, mundane involvement. Do you know what the word mundane comes from? It is the Latin word for world, mundus, meaning world, mundane, worldly. Yes, Reb Mordechai, please.
No, I was just doing something with my hand.
Oh.
I wasn't asking a question. Sorry.
Okay. So just like the sins become elevated to a higher level, right? So this is the idea that he was hung above the 50 amos, meaning that through Haman, we reached beyond the worldly, where the hidden good and the most evil thing can now become revealed. That was what Purim was about. So now the Alter Rebbe continues, and he's going to now talk. The Alter Rebbe is now going to use an amazing language. This is going to be an amazing, amazing language that the Alter Rebbe is going to. Have you ever tried to serve Hashem and tried and tried and tried? It just doesn't. You just can't seem to change yourself. You just can't seem to become the person that you're trying to be. Has that ever happened to you? Like for a decade, for your entire lifetime? Sometimes I look at myself in the mirror and I think, really, 60 years, like going through the same challenges, the same difficulties, the same stuff, and what's going on here, and sometime a person might have the thought of giving up, and that their work and all of their efforts or so-called failures are worthless. Let's see what the Alter Rebbe has to say about it. So we know that every single Jew always wants to connect to Hashem. Every single Jew, huh? I've met some that I think don't, maybe. So maybe the Alter Rebbe here is referring to it on the subconscious level, the neshama level. He really wants to connect to Hashem, but he doesn't realize it. So it manifests itself in his being, a self-hating Jew. But anyway, it's another story. But let's just assume for the Jews that are on this in this class here, or for the Jews that it applies to. So every Jew always wants to connect to Hashem, and he tries as much as he possibly can, but he feels like a loser. Sometimes in our attempts to get closer to Hashem and to serve Hashem and to focus during davening and to become a better Jew, sometimes we can feel like a loser. So some foolish people give up because of this. Listen to this. So, they say that the definition of insanity is to keep on trying to do the same thing that doesn't work over and over again. The Alter Rebbe says no. The definition of insanity is when you stop doing it over and over again because you don't think it's working. So some foolish people give up. Now, give up doesn't mean necessarily that they just totally decide they're going to not become religious anymore, but I'm not going to try anymore. I'm not going to strive. But the Alter Rebbe tells us this is a foolish mistake. How do you like that? Let's see, what does he say in Hebrew? He calls it shtus gadol. It's not just a foolish mistake. He calls it a big. It's a shtus gadol. How would we have the? Let's say it is a great foolishness. It's not just being foolish. It's extreme foolishness. The real truth of how we connect to Hashem during exile will show us why this is a mistake. And here the Alter Rebbe goes and explains this to us very beautifully. We need to know the following. The Jewish people came to Hashem during exile, and they say, and this is from Yeshayahu, for you, Hashem, are our Father. Ki ata, it says in the pasuk, Ki ata avinu. You are our Father. Abraham doesn't know us. Yisrael doesn't recognize us. The pasuk continues that Hashem, you are our Father and Redeemer. From always is your name. So, on the one level, this is again an amazing thing, right? Even when a Jew is not recognizable to Abraham and to Yisrael, the simple shot in the pasuk is that God is beyond that, and God is still our Father. Wow. But here, the Alter Rebbe is going to take another interesting twist on this line. What about Yitzchok? Does Yitzchok recognize us? Interestingly, in the pasuk we talk about Abraham and Yisrael, but not Yitzchok. And here's what it says in the Gemara. So in the above verse, our forefather Yitzchok is not mentioned. And in the Gemara, it explains that this is because specifically Yitzchok is connected to the future redemption. So in the future redemption, it says that Dafka, we're going to say Dafka, specifically Yitzchok, you are our Father. Now, the Rebbe will explain how Yitzchok, who is connected to the attribute of severity and concealment, can enable us to connect to Hashem in the time of concealment during exile, thereby enabling us to bring about the ultimate redemption. And so the basic bottom line is to not give up hope in the time when it seems hopeless, the time of exile. That's basically the Nakuda, that's the basic point here. And as it's known, and this is why I mentioned earlier, that it was specifically at the time when Hashem was exiting from the Beis HaMikdash, exiting from the Holy of Holies, that what did Ezekiel see? He saw the image, and the image was God's unbreakable love of the Jewish people. He saw the image of the Jewish people within God. That was the image that he saw on the throne. As is known that at the beginning of the history of the Jewish people after leaving Egypt, the presence of Hashem was openly revealed in everything. Whatever they would ask Hashem for, they would receive, whether it was physical or spiritual. And they also had prophets who revealed Hashem to them on a very high level. So I'm not sure where this is taken from. He says, as it's known. I should look into the notes in the back. There are footnotes on all of this, like sometimes where this is taken from, but I'm not sure where we get this. Isaac, do you have any recall on whatever the Jewish people wanted, they would ask for, and it would happen? The second part, of course, they did have prophets and things were revealed. But in any case, we'll take it for granted, and we'll go further. We'll take it as a given, rather. This is because at that time, Hashem's attributes that correspond to Abraham and Yisrael, namely kindness and to mercy, were openly revealed, and we saw those attributes and how Hashem fills all the worlds on a revealed level, and thereby the Jewish people were able to see open miracles. Well, that we definitely saw, right? The splitting of the sea, the exodus from Egypt. Weren't those amazing miracles? Only if we could see such miracles today, and the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us that they exist today, even more, even in a greater way. But now, during this exile, our miracles we do not see, meaning that we can't see the miracles that are happening right in front of our nose. Not because there are no miracles, God forbid. It doesn't say in the verse that now in exile there are no miracles. It says we do not see the miracles. Oso seinu lo ra'inu. But because we aren't able to see the miracles. In fact, not only is it not true that there not only, a lot of double negatives here. Let's just put it in the positive. Not just that we have miracles today. It's not just that we have miracles, but even more so, the miracles during exile are on a much greater level, as it says in the Gemara in Yuma, page 69b. This is his true awesomeness. This is Hein no Rosav, that the Jewish people survive in exile. And this is his true might, that he holds himself back from destroying all the wicked people in order that we should still have free will to serve him. But the problem is that we don't have any more prophets who know what is really going on, who can tell us and explain this to us. It's interesting that, so really the existence of the Jewish people, that we can even subsist in exile, is a miracle. It's a miracle that we would rather Hashem would take away that miracle. And we'd rather something much less miraculous, like us subsisting in Israel with the Holy Temple. But nevertheless, so the existence of the Jewish people during exile, right? This is the greatest miracle. The Gemara says, Hein nora osav. Not just the Gemara and Yuma, Daf 69b, that says that. It's actually Joseph Leibniz. You've ever heard of Leibniz? Leibniz was a German philosopher who was good friends with the Emperor of Prussia, Franz Joseph. This is going back to the, I think the 1800s. You've heard of Prussia? Used to be a big country. Used to be a whole empire, Prussia. So he was, the emperor was actually friendly towards the Jewish people. And he had one of his advisors was this philosopher, Leibniz, who was a believer in God. And he would always debate and discuss with the emperor, and the emperor said, prove to me that God exists. So Leibniz said, I'll bring you two proofs that God exists. One proof is, go out into the evening and look up at the sky and see all of the stars, the millions and millions of stars out in heaven, right? That is an indication that there's a God, right? Look at how vast and how great that is. You can see there's a God who this didn't just happen, right? This isn't just a mistake. That's proof number one. Proof number two, he said, is that the Jewish people still exist. That the Jewish people exist during this harsh exile, that is a proof of the existence of God. So so this is a great miracle, even greater than going out of Egypt, is that we are still here. And not that the 150 years since then have been so much easier. No, they've been much more trying and much more difficult. Today, practically, Baruch Hashem, living as a Jewish person is pretty easy. Baruch Hashem. But this is a historical anomaly. If you want to say, go ahead, speak up.
Yeah, Leibniz was also a mathematician. He was a co-developer of calculus, although Isaac Newton gets most of the credit for it.
He was what they call a polymath. A polymath meant that he was an expert in many, many different areas of science. So he was the co-developer of calculus. Yeah. So thank you for that. Yeah. So he was really a great, just a great mind. He would debate. I don't know that he would debate in person, but he would debate. He would take the opposite side of who was the French philosopher who wrote Candide. Starts with a V.
Voltaire.
Voltaire. So he would argue with Voltaire. So Voltaire. So one of Leibniz's qualities was he was seen philosophically, he was seen as an optimist, as a great optimist. And Voltaire had his character in Candide called Dr. Pangloss, right? Who everything was good, everything was everything was so Panglossian is when you just see everything is fine, everything is you put a gloss over everything. But anyway, so this Leibniz, he was definitely very impressed that the Jewish people exist. So the Alter Rebbe is going to go on and explain that specifically during the time of Galus, which is associated with Yitzchok because of Gevura, severity, God concealing his light, this is the time that when we have the greatest divine miracles. We'll continue, God willing, next week. Any questions or comments? Please feel free to open your mic, unmute.
That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming and participating. Have a wonderful week. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.